Hi, this is ShawNshawN. I do sales on eBay and also my own website, ShawNshawN.co, for art. Today we're going to review Miss Bala. So if you don't know, Miss Bala is a film of this Latino girl. She grew up in Tijuana for her childhood, and then her parents moved to LA, and she grew up American after that, but she still has some childhood friends back in Tijuana where she grew up. So she's, comes on, she's a makeup artist. They kind of established that in Act 1. That's pretty well shot. And she crosses the border to go see her old friend from childhood to help her win Miss Baja California, which is a real pageant that's held in Mexico. So they go to the club. They have to kind of warm up to the lead organizer of the event. Judging can be staged. So the trick is, supposedly, if you sleep with the top guy, you win the contest. So her friend's like, hey, whatever, I'll win the contest. And her friend's like, you sure you want to do that? It's kind of gross, right? So she's already kind of introduced to this kind of sleazy part of, how the pageants are run, which, seeing Donald Trump, we all know how kind of sleazy it can be, right? So they go to this event, and she goes to this local club to snooze up this guy. It's Mr. Salciado. And so their friends split, and her friend Christina goes to talk to this guy. Salciado checks out her friend and says, ooh, Gina Rodriguez, who's Gloria. She's like, oh, she's pretty hot too. She's like, I'm going to the restroom. So she splits, goes to the restroom. So she goes in the restroom, about ready to take a pee. And also she hears these people breaking in. She's like, what's this? Locks the door. And they break in. Who are you? Blah, blah, blah. And it's this whole gang. It turns out they're there to assassinate someone there. And then they take her with them. And they try to assassinate Mr. Salciado. Salciado is able to escape. But then her friends are split. Gloria has no idea what happened to her friend Susie. She waits up all night, calls the ambulance, and then she sees this local police officer. She's like, oh, I need your help. He's like, go to the police officer. He's like, no, I need your help. I know the guys that shot up the club last night. He's like, oh, okay, let me take you straight there. And he says, I'll help you out. So he drives, and he's like, oh, I gotta go pick up my lunch. And he goes into this hotel, and she's like, what the hell's going on? All of a sudden his gang members come. She's like, oh my god, she realized she's been set up. So she makes a run for it. She gets caught, and so then she's snatched by this local gang. And they're like, hey, you do this one favor for me, and then we'll go find your friend. Okay. She doesn't really have a choice, right? So she drives this car, tells her to park in front of this house, and boom, they blow it. And this is all in the marketing, so I'm not giving anything away. It happens to be a local DA office. So not only they blow it up, but there's 3 DA agents in there. So now she's wanted by the DEA. She's basically a international terrorist, right? So now she's like, oh shit, she didn't even, she's like, oh my god, she's freaking out. I just helped to blow up these people. This is crazy, right? And she knows she's in deep doo-doo, right? So they drag her back to the organization. Then they have her they're gonna meet up, and then she figures out a way to sneak away. So she sneaks away. She's gonna run across the border, and then she gets snagged, boom, by this other gang. She's like, who the hell's these people? And it turns out it's the DA, and the DA knows she was the one that parked the car and blew up their friends, right? So she's like, you're gonna go to prison. And I was like, I didn't know anything. And again, this is all in the marketing. So she's been set up by this gang. Now she's screwed. She doesn't know where her friend is. She's going to go to prison. And the DA is like, you got to work for us and snitch out this local gang. She's like, what? Because she doesn't really have an option. She's going to prison or do this. So she's like, fine. So she goes back to the local gang member. They're a little suspicious, especially the number 2 is very suspicious of her. But the number 1, for whatever reason, he's not suspicious. He thinks he can turn her into, his main girl. So he starts seducing her with, all these different dresses, and they go for a local barbecue, and so he's kind of schmoozing her, and then he actually teaches her how to shoot. And then they send her on this mission. She goes back to San Diego, picks up some guns, and she meets this other black gang member. She barely, she makes it through the border somehow, and that goes fine. And then she goes to this other part where they're going to make this trade-off with the rest. They get surrounded by the DEA agents, right? She's like, oh, I can finally get released. And she runs the door where she's supposed to get free, and the door's locked, and then she's like, what the... So she figured out she's been betrayed by the DA, so she knows she has to play along with the local gamer. She goes and runs back. The guy tries to rescue her. He gets shot, and then she helps him drag him back. So he thinks like she's her friend, but it was only because the DEA sold her out and she had no options, right? So she still doesn't know where her friend is. Then finally, this Lena, the local cartel, is like, yeah, we know where your friend is. And then he's at this club, and she's been, captured, and she's been forced to be a prostitute. And then she finds her friend, and then it turns out there's a whole switch around. I'm not going to give away the whole plot, but there's a whole switch about who's responsible for what. So it has a lot of this kind of back and forth, working the DEA, working the drug cartel, the local police, the corrupt police. this nice triangle of, you know, who did it, who's responsible for what, who's lying about what, how do you keep surviving as this young girl. So interesting enough, the Miss Bala is actually based on another Mexican film called Miss Bala, the same name, in 2011. And that film was based off an actual event that happened where Miss Sinola, one of the pageant winners, she actually got caught on a weapons charge with drugs and weapons and everything. And then supposedly what happened was she was dating her boyfriend, and her boyfriend happened to be part of the cartel. She didn't know, supposedly. And then they kidnapped her father, and then they used her to get around the country because she's a Miss Pageant. She has to travel, right? So they're going to smuggle these drugs and weapons under her, you know, with the clean name. So that's kind of the original story. So it has a really interesting story. In this story, they don't use the father. They just have the friend who's, you know, he's looking for the friend. So I don't know if you need the father necessarily, like they cut that out. They do have a little kid instead, so that's much more of a sappy story, I think. So that has much more better motivation in a way, because you obviously, as a young person in their 20s, you would be very protective of young children, right? And then this drug cartel, he's actually threatened her godson. So it has a lot of good motivation, I think, to the characters. I was just kind of suspecting from the marketing, it looked like she's going to become this super badass heroine, and she's basically a normal heroine, what you would expect in a situation like that, being 18, 20. So it's realistic, but then in the marketing, they kind of oversell it a little bit. Probably not too smart on the marketing, I would say. On the marketing, I think, you know, they could have shown much more of the prostitution side of the Christina, more than just, they showed one photo and it's kind of like it's okay, but I think they should have put a little bit meat out there. Obviously they want to keep the PG-13, but maybe it should have made it a little bit more R. So one of the reasons why El Sicario was so good is they had these grim scenes, like people buried in the walls and these crazy shootouts. And this one has some of the shootouts, but they don't have all the grim realities. Like, and with their Mexican guitar, it's really grim reality, hanging people from telephone wires and all kind of craziness. So they could have had a little bit more grizzle in there, and I think that would have really shown that this cartel guy is really bad. In this film, you really don't feel that he's super bad. I mean, he kills like one or two people, but you feel like he's just a victim of the circumstance, in the sense he's running a gang, he has to do drug trading, and the police are going to shoot at him, right? So in that sense, I think, you know, it's kind of a softening up of the drug cartel and how guilty this guy would have been. Maybe a little bit more background on him, why, because he's also Mexican American, so that would have been kind of interesting, a little bit of his backstory, so that would be more of a tighter grip. Also, the chief of police, they could have given a little more detail on that. I think that would have been a little more detail on that. You see that the police are corrupt in the beginning, but you don't know how corrupt, so if they would have shown a little bit more of that, it would have gave a little more meat and balance out the three different kind of criminals and villains of the story, so you don't know where you get a better sense of how Gloria survives in this environment. Overall, I liked the film. I think it was a little bit over marketed. They probably gave away too much of the story in the marketing, which isn't smart. Yeah, I would have shown a little bit less, so you kind of were a little bit more surprised. I really wasn't surprised at where the story was going because of the marketing. So the marketing gave away so much of the story that you're like, there's only a little bit surprise twist in the end, so not much to it. It's kind of what you would expect. Overall, it's a pretty fun movie. It's good. Timing's very short, 1 hour and 44 minutes, so not too long. So it's a really nicely timed film, I think. Very well edited from that perspective. It's by director Catherine Hardwicke, so female director, so you got a better feel, I think, of the female response of how you become a badass, how realistic responses of women. So I think that's really good. But yeah, overall, I like the film. I'll give it a thumbs up. Hopefully you give me a thumbs up. And if you want to subscribe below. And I'll see you in the next movie review. Thanks for watching, guys.